He stormed a Park Avenue skyscraper armed with an assault rifle. But who was the intended target of Monday's Midtown Manhattan massacre? Plus, Epstein explained, the president revealing alarming details on why he booted Jeffrey Epstein from Mar-a-Lago. And how did this happen? A small local police department in Maine accidentally hired an illegal immigrant to its force. Who's really to blame here? Those stories and more today, Wednesday, July 30th. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. A rebate rollout on Capitol Hill. Republican Senator Josh Hawley introduced a bill in Congress this week that would give millions of American workers and families $600 in tariff rebates. The idea behind the American Worker Rebate Act is pretty simple. Take some of the revenue generated by President Trump's new tariffs and send it back to the American consumer. So far this year, the tariffs have brought in $113 billion. Now, an extra $600 is nothing to sneeze at, but when you put it next to more than $100 billion, it might not seem like a whole lot. But Hawley is leaving open the possibility of sending Americans even more money if tariff revenue exceeds projections. So it kind of seems like a pretty great plan, right? Money back in the pockets of taxpayers. Well, not so fast, say members of his very own party. Many of his fellow lawmakers prefer to use any extra funds to pay down the $1.8 trillion federal deficit, which makes sense considering a central tenet of the GOP is fiscal conservatism. But Hawley may have a big name backer to this plan since the rebate idea was first floated by President Trump last week.
We have so much money coming in, we're thinking about a little rebate, but the big thing we want to do is pay down debt. But we're thinking about a rebate.
Now, the rebate wouldn't be $600 just across the board. The plan would limit payouts based on how much money a taxpayer or family makes. And now to President Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. The president is shedding some more light on his association with the late sex offender. As you all know, lawmakers, average voters, and conspiracy theorists alike on both sides of the political aisle will not let this story go. Now, it's been well documented that Trump knew Jeffrey Epstein. Before becoming the leader of the free world, Trump, like Epstein, was part of the ultra-wealthy New York City elite. Now, Trump has emphatically said in the past that he had Epstein booted from Mar-a-Lago, but now we're getting a little more detail into exactly what went down. The president suggesting that Epstein was using his Florida club spa as a sort of hunting ground for young women.
But no, he took people that worked for me, and I told him don't do it anymore, and he did it. And I said, stay the hell out of here.
One of Epstein's most well-known victims was a woman by the name of Virginia Giuffre, who took her own life earlier this year. Now, Trump confirmed that Giuffre worked for him at Mar-a-Lago and that she was one of the people Epstein supposedly scooped up to become a traveling masseuse. Now, this was part of Epstein's MO, lure women in to work for him as a massage therapist and then use that intimate setting to corner them for sexual abuse. As for her time under his employ at Mar-a-Lago, here's what the president said.
And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know, none whatsoever.
Now to the latest tragedies of war in Ukraine. A Russian bombing this week claimed the life of a 23-year-old woman who was expecting her first child. Adding insult to injury here, she was reportedly ecstatic about becoming a mom after suffering several miscarriages. The Russian airstrike hit a hospital maternity ward where the mother-to-be, who was 7 months pregnant, was seeing her doctor because she had a high-risk pregnancy. The heart-wrenching death is just one of 21 civilian lives lost at the hand of Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin's most recent bombardments. Now, following the bloodshed, Russia slammed President Trump's newly fast-tracked 10 to 12-day deadline, calling it, quote, a threat and step towards war. A top Putin ally went on to say that the country would not abide by the new deadline and even taunted President Trump, saying, quote, don't go down the Sleepy Joe road. Now to our big story, the latest on the deadly shooting spree in Midtown Manhattan. What was the motive? Authorities say notes found on the body of killer Shane Tamura suggest that the NFL was the actual target. Now, we're going to get into all of that, the why, in a moment. But first, we're learning more about the victims. Julia Hyman was a 27-year-old Cornell graduate working at Rudin Management. She was working on the 33rd floor when Tamura killed her shortly before taking his own life. Wesley LePatner was an executive at Blackstone and a married mother of two. The Yale graduate had previously worked at Goldman Sachs, and she served on numerous boards around New York, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Alain Etienne was a security guard in the Park Avenue skyscraper where the shooting occurred. He was the father of an older daughter and a son just days away from his 7th birthday. An NYPD officer, Didarul Islam, was a nearly 4-year veteran of the force. His wife is about to give birth to the couple's third child. The New York Post's Chris Nisi has been digging into all of this and how it unfolded, and he joins me now. So, Chris, what are we learning about the motive and why police are saying the NFL was the actual target?
Well, Caitlin, after Shane Tamura turned his gun on himself, cops found a rambling note in his wallet in which he blamed the NFL for his apparent CTE, which is a brain disease brought on by repeated blows to the head that has afflicted a number of pro football players. The note included the words, "Study my brain, please," potentially implying signs of the disease would be found. Tamura was a star running back in high school, but he never played at the collegiate or professional level. Whether it was CTE or something else, there's obviously been mounting evidence that Tamura suffered from some sort of as yet unidentified mental illness. Sources told us he had been put on psychiatric holds twice in recent years. The first time in 2022 after telling police that he was suicidal shortly after obtaining his gun license, and then again in 2024.
The fact that he obtained a gun license in lieu of all of that is pretty striking. And Chris, there are a lot of hoops that you need to jump through to get access to one of these big buildings in the city. And for people who aren't familiar with how this works, there are usually several layers of security to get through. So you did some reporting on security in that particular building and similar ones. So what did you discover?
So a lot of buildings like 345 Park Avenue do employ several layers of security, usually guards, key card entry, security gates, and access restricted elevators. The building where the massacre took place had all of these, but details have been sort of slow to emerge about how exactly he managed to get past all of those security measures. We do know that he started spraying bullets in the lobby, where he killed 2 office workers and a security guard who was an off-duty NYPD cop, before presumably hopping the turnstiles and storming the elevators in an attempt to reach the NFL headquarters on floors 5 through 8. He wouldn't have had any sort of key card, so it's possible that he just waited for an elevator door to open and just got in. He mistakenly took the wrong bank of elevators and ended up on the 33rd floor, where he killed another office worker and then took his own life.
I think it says something that the majority of the bodies were in that lobby area, the first major layer of security that he needed to get through in order to get access to that building. But beyond building security, there are other ways that companies are trying to keep their employees safe from things like this. Can you tell me a little bit about that? There was, of course, similar panic after the healthcare CEO shooting as well, and I think we're seeing that kind of resurge.
So after Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO, was gunned down in December, security chiefs at major U.S. companies met to discuss how they can keep their top executives safe around the clock. A lot of these measures aren't widely publicized for obvious reasons, but some of the steps we know that they discussed included things like security guards who walk a few feet ahead of the principal to scan for potential threats, armed drivers shuttling them to and from events. According to the data we looked at the time, around 25% of S&P 500 companies provide personal security services like these to executives outside of working hours. Blackstone, which has offices at 345 Park Avenue, where this week's mass shooting took place, spent $4.6 million to protect executives after hours in 2023 alone.
Our Chris DC, some really incredible reporting on this story. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Caitlin.
An illegal immigrant from Jamaica got caught up with the police in Maine, but this is not a story of a migrant arrest. This is a story of a migrant doing the arresting. The Old Orchard Beach Police Department in Maine has some explaining to do after the feds announced one of their cops isn't legally here in the U.S. Officer John Luke Evans was nabbed by ICE last week. He crossed the border in September of 2023, but overstayed his visa. He was initially supposed to leave after just a 1-week stint. Now, one ICE source said his employment, quote, would be comical if it weren't so tragic. Evans was hired in May as a seasonal officer for the busy summer vacation period in this small seaside town. The precinct even issued him a firearm, but he was barred from taking it home. However, ICE says Evans also tried to purchase his own personal firearm, which, given his status, that's a no-no. Now, as for his employment, the Old Orchard Beach PD says, not our fault, claiming that they sent his paperwork to the Department of Homeland Security's E-Verify system and that DHS approved him, noting that he had an eligible work permit through March of 2030. The police chief shot back at DHS's criticism of his hiring, saying in part, quote, "We are distressed and deeply concerned about this apparent error on the part of the federal government." And finally today, a story from our friends at Page 6. Kids say the darndest things. And if you're ever over at Kristen Bell and Dax Shepards' house, they might ask you to pass the peas. The celebrity couple admits they allow their two daughters, 12-year-old Lincoln and 10-year-old Delta, to curse like little preteen sailors. Shepard revealed his parenting perspective on the latest episode of his Armchair Expert podcast.
I fully swear in front of my kids.
Yeah.
They are allowed to swear, not with impunity, but when it's called for and they land it and it's in the house and not out at a restaurant, it's okay.
Yeah.
I was looking for competence. And then also my defense of it is like, I just told the girls like, hey, these are noises that come out of your mouth and you assign what they mean to you.
Late night host Seth Meyers was the guest on this particular podcast episode, and he definitely didn't have the same take, telling Dax Shepard that he and his wife worry that the language will make its way to school. He did, however, note that his kids are exposed to quite a lot of salty language on the streets of New York. Yes, salty is a mild term and not one I would use for the language being bandied about on the streets of New York. Then again, being from Jersey, 4-letter words are some of the first we learn when we're in diapers. But for a different kind of colorful language, head to the New York Post in print or online. Our writers are the best, the most creative in the biz. Those puns do not write themselves. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. Please and thank you. Do not make me use any of those colorful 4-letter words, and I know a lot of them. See you tomorrow.